Welcome back, boys. Today we're checking out Whatifalthist. Was the Unabomber right?
When I was a child, I heard about this madman called the Unabomber, named Ted Kaczynski. He was this crazy guy who launched a bunch of bombs, and he wanted us to return to being Stone Age tribes, supposedly. He was also a genius who had a math degree from Harvard and built up a brilliant plan to destroy modern civilization. From all of this, he sounds like a classic comic book villain, but in real life. The sort of thing Marvel would make up. This also all occurred like 10 years earlier and was something adults still had in the back of their minds, but not something which they brought up that much. Something very important happened in the next 10 years after I grew into an adult. The world around us changed. I like to say that the only way I could explain the America we live in today to my childhood self is that we turned into a sci-fi dystopia. In this context, the attitudes towards the Unabomber changed very markedly. Among disaffected young male circles, he's become known as Uncle Ted. As the society we live in has deteriorated before our own very eyes, people have gone back through the Unabomber's work and thought a lot of it seems quite prescient. This video is meant to be a sort of day in court for the Unabomber. As someone who never lived through the event, I hope to be objective about this historic figure. He died of suicide last year in federal prison in North Carolina, so I guess this is some form of belated obituary. We will look through the Unabomber's life to see whether or not he was right or wrong. Everybody, I'm Rudyard, those of elect and distribute your product that your they are. Part 1. Kaczynski as a man. There's this whole intellectual school of death of an author, which basically says you shouldn't judge authors for their own personal lives, but rather their body of work. I think this is a tool which was invented to counteract the Marxist tendency.
No, like who you are as a person and your like childhood and your friend, your network, your family, like all that has an impact in some kind of way on your work, whatever that is. So if you're gonna read a book or something, and you learn new stuff, it's very nice to have info about the writer, or as much info as you can, to look for like biases and stuff like that, so you don't get tricked into other people's delusions or their quirks. You don't learn their quirks. You just focus on your own to try to find what they are in your thinking, to become to refine yourself more, I guess, or to see your biases,
to trawl through the personal lives of authors they dislike, to create ad hominems to discredit ideas they don't want to actually have to deal with at face value. I don't really like this.
Yeah, it's like people like often like you can it's like there's always something to learn. Don't just like, if somebody does something bad, there might be a reason for it. It's like the Unabomber. I know a little bit, but it's just like, what led this dude to do the stuff he does or did, to try to figure out like why, because apparently this dude was smart as hell, I hear. So it's like maybe we have something to learn, or and it's like from bad things. I mean, you can learn a lot about people and the world through history, right? There's a lot of like bad shit that happened throughout history, but we look at it as like, why did this happen? Why did wars and shit like that happen? And you look at like everything like kind of detached, you don't put too much emotion into it. So yeah, you see it nowadays with people. It's like, if you don't agree with them politically and stuff, they become like really emotional, and they just like not just discredit your opinions, but they just like they straight up start to hate you, and it's like very bad.
this mental model, though. If you read the history of philosophy, for example, it's really clear that the essence of a philosopher is imbibed into his philosophy. Another intellectual variant of this is the founder effect, which my friend Samo Berja discovered, or that the character of the founder of an organization can be seen replicated across its internal structure long after his death. With Kaczynski, as an individual, he lived a very interesting life just by itself. So let's look through that. Kaczynski was born into a working-class Polish-American family. Surprise! In Chicago in 1942. He was incredibly intelligent and graduated high school, going to college at age 15. When his IQ was tested, it was 167, which is something around the 1,000,000th percentile for IQ, which is basically at the protected national treasure threshold for intelligence. He went to Harvard, and his original plan was to be an academic. Next comes a point in his life, which in general, again, seems like a story that would be written by Marvel, but which nearly jumps the shark plot-wise. When he was at Harvard, he participated in a illegal government testing program called MK Ultra. This was part of the CIA's research into brainwashing, the paranormal, and psychedelics. If you're interested in this kind of stuff, watch the video I made about the decades worth of research the CIA put into their explorations of the spirit world. Keep in mind, MK Ultra is not a conspiracy theory. We have loads of records of people who were involved, and the CIA has even released their own documents saying they did it. MK Ultra involved the CIA using psychedelics, hypnosis, sensory deprivation, isolation, verbal or sexual abuse, and sleep deprivation. Another important variable is that when the CIA realized that MK Ultra would get out and would make them look very bad, they shredded a lot of the documents. This really does beg the question, what else were they doing that they don't want us to know about? Keep in mind, this is a government agency that releases what it wants us to see. We've seen other stuff come out in that time period of the CIA manipulating the news, doing research in the spirit world, manipulating foreign governments, funding modern art, the feminist movement, selling coke in Latin America, or crack in inner-city ghettos. Again, this is what we know about. Kaczynski was involved in this, in which we know at least that he was part of an experiment in which the government agents tried to break apart his worldview. He would posit his ideas out the world, and then the CIA agents tried everything they could to rip it apart on any level. Someone's worldview is the reason they have to live, and so doing this as an experiment without his consent is just incredibly cruel. We also have records of the CIA verbally and emotionally abused him. Again, this is what we know happened. Men tend to not talk about abuse that readily, especially back then, and especially with the perpetrator being an obscenely powerful government agency, so it wouldn't surprise me if Kaczynski went through a lot worse that we don't know about. As I read about his biography, first of all, it's obvious that Kaczynski wasn't comfortable in his own skin. He was constantly wandering around, clearly trying to find some kind of escape. He lived off the grid in the woods of Montana, left academia because he couldn't take it. He felt immense shame for this and tried to go to a psychiatrist about it, but didn't trust them. As someone with PTSD, it's so clear and obvious to me that Kaczynski has PTSD, or had. There's just no way he doesn't. He acts exactly how someone with unhealed PTSD would. I can very easily see how the trauma he faced around his experiences with the CIA would inform his views on modern civilization, in that this faceless bureaucracy did something objectively evil and then faced zero consequences. He saw firsthand the bureaucratic state of the banality of evil, having no qualms about manipulating human nature to make people more docile or brainwash them. I can immediately hear people saying that his trauma made him biased, but what I would say is let's look at his ideas out of their own merit rather than looking for an ad hominem takedown. After his murders, Kaczynski was diagnosed with schizophrenia. I don't want to overextend my armchair psychologist credentials, in that my only pretensions to this field are having read a few dozen books on it, but I don't get any sense that he was a schizophrenic. I know what paranoid schizophrenia looks like, and it's not that. Through reading his manifesto, if he was actually schizophrenic, you would see jarring logical and writing style gaps in his work, which just aren't there. Schizophrenics don't have a coherent sense of the world, and that the world seems discrete, atomized, or cold to them. Kaczynski, even through the intense genius through which he carried out his terrorism, demonstrates that he had a pretty good grip on reality. When he was tried, Kaczynski's lawyers begged him to plead insanity. He refused, which I see as admirable, in that by pleading insanity, he would devalue his own manifesto as the ravings of a madman. He did plead guilty, thus receiving 8 consecutive life sentences. I guess he's got a lot of jail time for his future Hindu afterlives. The irony is that by diagnosing him as a schizophrenic, the society was literally just proving his point. One of the great ironies I see personally is when a system or person literally validates what you just said with their actions after you told them what they're doing, but they lack the self-awareness to realize they're doing it. I see it a lot with political radicals, in which I'll tell them that they've lost the ability to think rationally and have devolved into ad hominems. Then in response to that, they remain irrational and throw ad hominems at me. The Unabomber said that modern civilization is an all-encompassing bureaucratic machine which exists to consume the human soul. Look at how that machine responded to his life. It said he was insane to invalidate his ideas. Recognizing his sanity would be too difficult since we'd have to think about whether or not he was correct. It used a bureaucratic system to carry out this power play and then locked him up in another bureaucratic system. It's comparable to how in the Soviet Union they would send political dissenters to mental asylums, since if you weren't acclimated to the society, you were by definition not mentally adjusted. Modern society does this very well, telling dissenters they have anger issues or are repressed. Just look at the authoritarian personality as an example, which was a psychological manual that became incredibly popular in that it basically created the modern political spectrum and culture in about a dozen different ways, which I explained through this text wall. It said that conservatism, or being against leftism, was a mental illness caused by repressive parenting. Thus, we had to make parenting more permissive so we could leave behind our racism and irrational conservatism. With all this going on, the Unabomber didn't get tenure in academia. He had tried to become a math professor, and many of the teachers or co-workers he worked with have publicly stated that he was one of the most intelligent people they had ever met. His area of study is again math, which I could see very easily from the logical structure through which he wrote his manifesto. He developed some new, incredibly advanced mathematical theories that one of his colleagues wrote only about a dozen people around the country are capable of even comprehending it. Kaczynski developed a theory that our society is based off doing surrogates for real things. It's an idea I see reflected in Baudrillard's simulacrum, or that everything in our society is a fourth-level abstraction of something real. Junk food is an abstraction of real food, social media of real community, Walmart of a general store. We do things like play video games since the actual things that video games simulate, like hunting or waging war, which our ancestors actually did, are too destabilizing to the complex interconnected machine that is industrial civilization. This is very obvious in academia, in which academics are the most over-socialized demographic out there. If you know academics, you know that they, as a demographic, with some exceptions, are cowardly, envious, anxious, process-driven, and stuck in their heads. They are exemplifications of the over-socialization, which was the main crux of the Unabomber's critique of modernity. I can empathize with Ted that while he was thinking about the great issues bedeviling modernity, he saw their exact reflections inside academia. Yet academia lacked the self-awareness or wisdom to see his ideas at their own face value. Academia today is a bureaucratic machine which doesn't reward genius anymore and just spits out engineered products which benefit their class interests. The Unabomber then moved back to his family in Illinois first and then became a homesteader, living off the grid in rural Montana. He lived off the land without electricity when foraging and farming for his own survival. Over time, he realized that this was basically an impossible life today. Partly, it was the environmental degradation he saw caused by large companies, and also the government just doesn't like people living outside of their sphere of control. This made him decide to turn violent. This is what made the Unabomber famous. He delivered and sent bombs which killed 3 people and injured 23. He aimed at the leaders of technological industries in that he blamed the Industrial Revolution for the over-socialization which he worried about would destroy the human race. We will explain why he made this calculation in the next chapter. He did a brilliant job at doing this, demonstrating his intelligence isn't purely academic. He did such a good job that the FBI couldn't find him for the longest time, turning his crimes into a sensational national story. The name Unabomber stems from the FBI case, University and Airline Bomber, given Kaczynski targeted airlines and universities which specialized in technology. His goal was to make these fields terrifying for people to work in, thus slowing down technological development. He was only caught since he told a major newspaper that he would stop killing if they published his manifesto. His brother was able to study the writing tics and style that the Unabomber used. His brother gave the government a lead on him, turning him in. The feds were finally able to capture him in his isolated Montana cabin, sending him to jail. Part 2. Oversocialization. Kaczynski's thesis with what's wrong with modernity is actually pretty simple. The thesis is that modernity is such a complex, interconnected system that it forces humans to operate like cogs in a machine, repressing the things that make us human in order that the machine runs more smoothly. It's easiest to start explaining this by giving one example I've found which does fit into this logical scheme, that being family structure. For most of history, as I've explained in this video, the family was the most important thing in life. In most societies over history, your family determines your work, your spouse, the education system, social network, insurance, among anything else. People lived in large clan compounds in which extended families supported each other. Even in non-clan individualist societies, like Christian Western Europe, the family was still an incredibly integral aspect of daily life. If you look at family today, and this isn't just true in the Western world, you can see that it's a shell of its former self. Half of marriages end in divorce. Most young people don't get married. Marital happiness rates have crashed. It's completely normal for family members to never see each other or not even really like each other. This is something that the rest of history would view as completely incomprehensible or even evil. What happened in
Yeah, I hear what he's saying. It's like family, for many families, like it's kind of it's really bad compared to what it used to be. And like now it's like very common to see people that like are raised in just like a single parent household, like only the mother. And there is no like extended family, and you're like kind of like you're on your own, which is fucking insane. um there still exist cultures with like massive families, and like the fucking grandparents are living with the children and stuff, and the family is very connected and together.
modernity which precipitated this? I recently read an interesting book called The History of Work. It talks about how people's daily work has changed over human history. One of the fascinating things it talks about is that the family was super important in a pre-industrial society, given the family was the dominant economic unit. There's basically no
Yeah, I mean, before, kind of women wanted, well, you know, like security and stuff like that, so they needed a man, and they took care of a man and did what they were supposed to do. But now it's like government is kind of the man for these women. So there's a reason why they left. So they vote so incredibly. Like the gap between men and women and their voting is so much, is because the benefits the government or the state gives women, which should have been given by a man, right? So that's kind of it. It's like that's the father, that's the man for a lot of these like woke, like liberal women.
parallel in the pre-industrial world except for slavery of clocking in at a giant company and then working 10 hours a day 5 days a week. Almost everyone were independent renting farmers or self-employed. Besides them, you had craftsmen, merchants, or the nobility. All of these were family businesses. Keep in mind that pre-industrial Europe was incredibly moderate by the standards of this stuff. What this meant is that the family was critically important to this society. You had to get along with your family since your dad was your boss. Then when your parents were old, you had to take care of them. The husband and wife was an economic unit in which the husband secured resources and the wife took care of the children or passive tasks. You have more kids since they're free labor for your small business. This all made perfect sense and seemed completely intuitive and obvious to everyone involved. The idea of entrenched social classes or castes made sense given your family supplied your work, education, social network, and spouse. Thus, people ended up associating with their own class, which crystallized. You can also see why the state was incredibly weak in these societies, in which, in most pre-industrial societies, 70% of the state's budget went into the military, while the government made up something between 1 to 5% of the nation's total economy, while in most Western countries today, it's between a half to 2/3. The family performed all the functions that the state does today. Likewise, you can see why religion is incredibly important, since without the ability to have rules for interpersonal relationships, the entire society falls apart, since it's all based upon social relationships. Let's look at what industrialization did to this. Firstly, if everyone lives in a big city or a suburb, the sorts of communities that developed in pre-industrial villages naturally can no longer exist. The scale just gets too big. I think you can't overestimate the importance of this. When you move from a community where everyone knows everyone, with their quirks, strengths, or weaknesses, to anonymity, our brains process that completely differently. Society changes from an accumulation of relationships you have with everyone involved to a series of bureaucracies which provide you services. When you're operating at the scale of modernity, with the atom...
Yeah, I mean, for me, the stakes are like the thing is I live with people, right? But they're random. So it's like I don't really give a fuck if good or bad things happen, because the thing is, the people I know now, I won't know them in 5 years, and I'll be forgotten, and they will forget me, I will forget them, right? So in like, I guess, smaller villages and stuff like that, you had to put in effort to be friends with everybody, or like at least try to fit in and be of use, to not be ostracized and stuff. But now it's like, it's insane to me how the death of like bonds and friendship, brotherhood, and just how do you say it, just like relationships as a whole, like they're completely dead in this like soulless, sterilized, like bureaucratic system.
That goes with... When you're operating at the scale of modernity, with the atomization that goes with urbanization, this means that bureaucracies fill the void which community and family used to. Rather than working on the family farm, dad works at a big company. We're at the point where 75% of adult women work, which is statistically more than any demographic wanted. Thus, the wife also works independently. Then child rearing is what happens when the parents are free. The child rearing itself, however, is mostly outsourced to schools and daycares, depending on social class.
Yeah, it's like there's so many other things to think about, which is, it just sounds insane to me. It's like you a woman has to work and make money and shit just to send the children away to let somebody else raise them and whatever the fuck they learn. It's like, it's insane to me how it's like you can have a child here in the West, and it's like a few years go by of them in the school, and suddenly they don't listen to you, they don't believe in what you have to say. They're completely indoctrinated, and that scares a lot of people, right? They don't become your children.
What you might notice is that for most of the waking hours, the family members don't associate with each other. In the pre-industrial society, a wife would respect her husband since she was dependent upon him for survival, and she saw him daily, or the things that he did to support her and the family. When you work with someone, it creates a bonding and shared experience. Now, she and her husband are apart for most of the day, then they return together for a relatively short nighttime, which is often used to accomplish various boring tasks. The same thing is true with school, in which the kids spend most of their waking day and effort at school. In this case, the survival of the people involved in the important relationships occur in external, bureaucratic, impersonal organizations. The husband and wife are really dependent on pleasing their boss, not each other. Since the kids don't have to work with their parents, neither party has to understand the other. It's a very modern complaint, one that I can attest to, that your family doesn't understand you.
How many women listen to their boss more, or do exactly as the boss says at their work and follows everything the boss says at work, but doesn't listen to their fucking husband? Like, it's insane to me if you think about it. It's like they'll listen and respect the boss more than the man at home. That is the crazy.
I think a very modern feeling is not being understood. Like, you wear lots of different masks for different situations. You wear a mask for your boss, for your wife, for your children. You compartmentalize your life, but none of it's really you. In the pre-industrial world, you just lived, worked, and did everything with your local community. The only comparable group were servants or slaves. Everyone in your local community knew you, and there was more of a concept of the flaws implicit in human nature. Keep in mind, our society's conception of human nature isn't accurate. From looking at both ancient wisdom and modern studies, humans tend to under-prioritize material wealth or comfort for happiness, and over-prioritize interpersonal relationships, community, and religion. This is why historic societies lived in poverty, as do people in the third world do today, but they can be happy. Thus, the weakening of all this stuff isn't a side effect, it's the main course. You're creating this silent gnawing pain inside the modern world, something which is so personal, you'll never get.
How many dudes they feel this, whether like they just do, just intuitively, they see, they can't, maybe they don't pick up on it, but it's like daily, just clock in, clock out, they got no friends, they fucking play video games on the in their free time, or if you're younger or you're unemployed, it's like all you do is play video games and waste your time, maybe drink, indulge in hedonism and garbage because you have nothing else to do. So many dudes suffer with this. I see that.
People to talk about it, but which is secretly killing society slowly. There are two depressing things at the Industrial Revolution which have negative social effects, those being scale and standardization. For a symbol of how these operate, let's use the example of an old-style factory. You know, the kind that Henry Ford made, in which every person had a job of attaching a little bit to a car. There was a French author of the time who wrote, "Imagine the life of someone whose entire life is to put the screw on that bolt." In the pre-industrial world, you had a concept of the pride of craftsmanship, and you literally knew the person you were making the cart or the axe for. Certain eras of history end up naturally selecting for certain traits. For the Industrial Revolution, it's those two traits being scale and standardization. In that, the societies which resulted in standardizing a process or increasing the size were able to crush those who weren't. For example, family farms are no longer the way most crops are grown in America, given giant agricultural empires using industrial-level equipment and owning thousands of acres naturally outcompete them. This is a process which we've seen play out over the last lifetime, in which in 1920, 90% of Americans were either self-employed or worked at a small company. Meanwhile, in 1990, 90% of Americans were employees. Today, only 10% of Americans are self-employed or employers, while 1/3 work in the gig economy. So it has gotten better. One of the interesting themes I've seen reading psychological books, and an idea Kaczynski put a lot of thought into, is that humans will sacrifice wealth for freedom and autonomy. It feels weird to call medieval peasants free, given in many ways they were significantly less free than we are today. And I do really want to stress that this pre-industrial social order is not utopian, and it feels...
Yeah, it's like it wasn't fucking perfect, and like just imagine like if you had like a health problem or whatever the fuck, like you're Denzo, get the fucking flu and you, or like tooth, like thank God for like modern medicine, bro.
Silly to call the pre-industrial world utopian, but in a lot of these societies, your entire life was dictated by your family shame, or by very stringent moral codes. And With all of this being said, though, in critical ways, pre-industrial societies were more free than we are today. There wasn't a concept of having a boss who would watch over you all day as you worked, a regulatory system, rules of
Yeah, there wouldn't be somebody like up your fucking ass and like micromanaging every little fucking aspect of your work or life. Uh, yeah, you could kind of be your own individual, much more, right? And you had like more, you had like fuck, let it.
conduct and all that stuff. Once you study pre-industrial anthropology, you find that people just lived their lives. There wasn't a sharp separation between work, family, religion, community, government, or the nation. No concept of working in
Like everyday life now is set up in such a like time sheet, autistic way. Like how do I explain it? It's like a spreadsheet. It's like, okay, 50 minutes. No. Okay, like you wake up. Okay, 5 minutes you brush your teeth. Okay, 10 minutes you eat your food. Okay, and it's like, okay, you work from there to there, work, and then free time, and then like everything is set up in such a like ratty way, like autistic way. And back then, I mean, things were kind of just mixed. It was like, okay, fuck it. Oh, it's summer. Let's just work, and then in the winter, let's just like it was very like it was very like mixed, and like I can't imagine somebody would get fucking mad at you for starting eating when you wanted to if you fucking worked at a farm, right? But now it's like you start your fucking lunch 5 minutes early, and it's like a fucking problem in these like bureaucracies or like in these big companies, right? They try to like micromanage every little aspect of humans of human behavior of like just life in general. They try to be your fucking god. Like what?
9 to 5. In the pre-industrial world, there was no concept of being employed. A lord or master craftsman would have servants or apprentices. Given they lived with their boss, there was more of a concept for responsibility for their lives as people, not just employees. The thing is that they existed to perform tasks. The servants or apprentices lived with the Lord and did what needed to be done, and then just went back to living their lives. Work in the pre-industrial world was largely seasonal, with a few months of heavy work and then months of doing nothing. Whether or not people worked more hours than today in the pre-industrial world is complicated and varies massively based off time period and region, as I explain in this text wall. Furthermore, for the apprentices and servants, that wasn't expected to just be your life. Those were things you did when you were young, which you then grew out of. An apprentice to a craftsman would later become a master craftsman, often even inheriting the business. There was a huge social crisis in early 19th century England when you had this whole social class of people who ended up working in factories for their whole lives as employees. This was seen as unnatural. There was an attitude that an employee wasn't a real man, and thus had no real right to get married. A lot of the discourse around Luddites and Marxism during early industrialization was due to the social turmoil the Industrial Revolution did to the traditional self-employed social structure. The modern school system was explicitly designed to break people's will to make them easier industrial employees. We have loads of
Like this is like I wish more people knew this. Is like, yeah, it was created for you to be just like a copy paste like worker. That's all. You don't go to these places uh if you're more like an art person, you know. I mean, bro, it would if I was an artist, it would break my heart to go into like a school and like your very soul gets fucking crushed because everything is so standardized and everything's so soulless. Just look at modern art, bro. It's the most like mentally ill thing I can look at. All right, and then I look at uh pre Weimar art, and I look at that and I'm like, holy shit, whoever made that is a good artist. Like, thumbs up. Like, that's some good shit. That's a I can tell a real human made that with real emotions. But this modern art shit, it's like, what the fuck is that? It's like it's like they make it just to like clown on us. Like at that point, it makes me fucking angry. Maybe that's the fucking point of that fucking modern art garbage.
To break people's will to make them easier industrial employees. We have loads of historic records of how difficult it was to get pre-industrial farmers to acclimate to modern work. They would show up for work hours late whenever they wanted, take days off randomly, would refuse the work their bosses gave them, would talk back to their boss, and everything like that. We literally have records of the founders of the American school system around the turn of the 20th century, literally saying their goal was explicitly to do this. For more info, watch my video on this topic. Keep in mind, we don't remember anything we learn in school past, let's say, age 12, and none of it is used for adult life.
Yeah, that's the thing. That's the thing that like really fucked with me. It's like I still remember, and I still don't know. Um, I remember we were learning about algebra. Like fucking, I already knew it was like GG. It was over. Like I knew I am not a fucking mathematician. I suck at this shit. I don't want to do it. But we were learning about algebra, and I was just looking. I actually did learn it. I just like forgot about it, right? Because I never used it. There's so many fucking things they let like. It's such a time sink. It's such a time waste. I wish we delved so much more into history or philosophy or like something like critical thinking and shit, but that would never ever be allowed because then you create real people with like real souls and like you like fuck. There's so much garbage we were taught, and it wasn't even real. It was like came from like old textbooks, and probably a lot of the shit I learned is like fake. It's a fugazi. Like fuck. I hear what he's saying, man.
The reason we still have school is that the skill they're selecting for is ability to sit still, to work long hours, compliance, and the ability to memorize or regurgitate information, make mechanical calculations, wake up early, and skills like that.
Like they're just looking for like these autistic people that can't like even express themselves properly, and they can't like think abstractly. They just simply lack the ability to see more. It's like there is more. It's just like they can't see it. And like fuck.
Pre-industrial people would view school as incredibly strange and even tyrannical. Wait, you have strangers raise your kids, you tell them what to do without the parent knowing. It's also mandatory that you go to school. A very interesting book I read, and in fact one of the most interesting anthropological books I've ever read, is The History of Manners by Norbert Elias. And it's about how manners have changed over Western history from the Middle Ages onwards. And it shows a lot of really interesting underlying points. An example of it is that people in the Middle Ages would cut up animal carcasses in front of their friends before eating them, or knights would write poetry about how much they loved the act of killing, or friends and family would have sex in front of each other, and it was a society with no sense of privacy, and things that would be completely disgusting in our society were seen as normal.
Yeah, it's like I mean you can't even like fart. Does that make sense? In today's society, you can't express yourself as a human in any kind of way because then you're looked at as a fucking weirdo. I'm sure maybe he can explain better.
And the reasoning he gives is that as society got more complicated with more interconnected parts, we don't want to see people we don't know do very private things. And that makes sense being the other side of Kaczynski's thesis of oversocialization. It feels very strange to me that I'm talking up the pre-industrial world this much, given there are very, very obvious negatives to the pre-industrial world. Firstly, on a daily basis, I try to be grateful for the material comforts which our era of history gives us. Infinite food, incredible medicine, rapid transportation, great entertainment, birth control, political freedom, air conditioning, infinite free learning. There are so many incredible benefits to our era that once you mention all of them, criticizing it feels insane. However, at the same time, you look into the soul of our society and you find something that's very, very sick. If you don't see it, it's difficult to explain to you, but for those who do see it, it's overwhelming. We can talk all day about how wealthy our society is, but it's also clear that something is very, very wrong. What the lesson here is
The hearts of the people are bleeding, man. I see that shit, but it's like extremely difficult for me to explain it to these, especially like these students, man, because they don't believe in like I don't know, I'm looked at as a schizo, even though I'm not. I'm like a normal dude. Like,
is that wealth is nowhere near the most important thing for happiness. Once you're out of poverty, wealth and happiness statistically have basically nothing to do with each other. I was having a conversation with my manager. We were talking about people we knew who were hyper woke and asked us if Texans, the state I live in, feel guilt for using air conditioning all year. What I told them is that air conditioning in Texas is non-negotiable. Without it, there would be an immediate migration back to the Rust Belt, which is where I'm from. Then I kept talking with my manager about the silly things climate change people push for, like the deindustrialization of agriculture or ending gas-guzzling cars. Europe is literally pushing for deindustrialization and degrowth, both of which, if pushed, would literally be mass extinction events. To get rid of modern agriculture today would be the death of billions of people. Meanwhile, they won't look at real issues pushing climate change. For example, being China or India installing another 100 coal power plants, and the real solution, which is nuclear energy. Then my manager and I reached the same conclusion. The reason they were pushing for this stuff is that they wanted suicide. I've said in so many previous videos that the aim of the modern left is explicitly suicide. They want the end of Western civilization.
yeah, it's because like look at what the fuck society has become. And of course people just want to fucking end it all. You see more and more people just straight up just dying. They just off themselves. And like people don't have shit to work for, and it's like it's insane to me how it's like you can walk in your neighborhood and it's like every 5 minutes it's new people, and you go to the store and it's like always new people. It's like everywhere it's like nobody you fucking know or care about, and vice versa. They don't give a shit about you either. You're just a background character. And I see that shit. But these like autistic academics and shit, they refuse to accept that all this like consumption and materialism and all that shit, it doesn't make humans happy, and they just like refuse to accept that. um I One thing I wish for is more friendship for people, because there is a massive like loneliness thing going on between not just men but women as well. Women are suffering incredibly much because of this system and world. And I wish there was more focus on masculinity and manhood, right? I wish more dudes, instead of locking themselves in a room playing 10 hours a day video games, they would go out and conquer, like, I mean, like a mountain, go hiking with some brothers, create bonds through struggle and something difficult, go fight, because that is the shit that creates bonds. You go through something difficult with a group of men, and suddenly, like, a few days go by and it's like, boom, they're your brothers. It just magically happened. But if you continue to just play video games with like randoms, and you don't really struggle, like it doesn't fucking matter. I am adamant, or like I strongly encourage it's like you can, in 2 weeks of physical activity with another man, you can become better friends with them than playing a year of video games with somebody else. So it's like you get the same bond but better in 2 weeks than what you would for 1 year of playing video games with a person. So go out there and be more physical, be a human, bro. I mean, you've said it before, but bro, like touch grass, when I have a question, like when is the last time you saw a natural running stream of water? When is the last time you saw a fire or built a fire? You know, like ask yourself this question: when's the last time you were a fucking animal instead of like this sterilized rat?
Whiteness, the Industrial Revolution. Let's take them at face value, which they literally tell us to do. The reality is that the psychological pressures of the Industrial Revolution are so great that people can't bear them. Thus, the societies which have had industrialization the longest, like Northwest Europe or the Northeastern US, are the areas attempting to commit suicide the most. Keep in mind, we're the exact same crazy monkeys as who were living in tribal communities of 100 people hunting mammoths 100,000 years ago. Could we really expect them to make the jump we did with the Industrial Revolution without some issues? I think what's going on is the nihilism, dehumanization, atomization of modernity is a lot more damaging than anyone realizes. I think as a society, we're in denial since it hurts so.
Yeah, this is a topic where you kind of need a lot of, you need to be number one, an open-minded person, right? And you, there's so much like kind of like pre-knowledge you need about this shit to even like see it. There's a lot of people that just don't get it. And I mean, I try to learn more about it, so maybe I could try to fucking explain to people. But even if I do, they won't listen. They don't give a shit. And yeah, I guess I just need to get stronger, you know, get more respect since I'm so young, you know. If I get stronger, I can say whatever I want. Like, what are people gonna tell me? It's like, particularly like in person, if you want more respect, you should be the person nobody can touch because you can say whatever you want. I mean, I know I'm a, how do you say it? I try to be as good of a person as I can. But there's a lot of people that are not not very like moral. Um, I meet particularly like these like woke students and stuff. They always preach about empathy and stuff like that, but and they always like call other people like racist and whatever the hell. But I see these are the people that are the actually the most judgmental and the most, how do you say it, actual racists. And they they are the first ones to call for like violence and stuff like that and wishing death upon other people, and it's insane to me.
Badly. I frequently ask people I know, let's say you're dying in a ditch now, what do you have to live for? I had a moment when I was suicidal as a teenager and I had that realization. For me, it was honor and my own pride as a man. Something that my parents and culture had imprinted on me at a young age. I realized that was something I could live for, where if everything else in my life went wrong, I would still have that. Let me
Yeah, you need to find something that nobody else, no other human can touch. Nothing can touch. And for many, that is God, or faith in God, or something higher, what is like some kind of spiritual or some kind of religion, right? And I mean, yeah. And the thing is, like, for many, it calms people down. It just makes them a better, more moral person. Like religion can have a very good impact on society, which it has had throughout history, right? But people with all the like material wealth, the industrial revolution shit brought, people kind of became like maybe a little like bitter at the traditions they were having and the faith they had, like in religion, because of all the like material comfort and and just like prosperity, I guess, in like materialism and shit. The industrial revolution and all that shit brought, people kind of threw away religion and tradition for because now it's like I think somebody else can explain that better.
Let me explain it this way. Our ruling class, or the bicoastal college educated globalist managerial elite, constantly shit on the Victorians as being repressed and a cold society. In general, when someone or some group isn't psychologically stable, you can look to their projections to figure out what their own insecurities are. I know a lot about the Victorians. Repressed or cold is not the right word for them. If you look at Romanticism, the letters they would write to each other, or even their view of history, it's very emotional, very dramatic, and they were very expressive. Yes, for sex, this is a very prude society, but keep in mind there is a lot of hypocrisy going on where there was a tremendous amount of prostitution and porn as well. Meanwhile, for our ruling class, they are very repressed. Repression is separation from our natural human urges. For example, being polyamorous and seeing your girl get railed by another man is very repressed and not liberating, since you are fighting your natural biological urges of masculine protectiveness. Hating your country is repressed, since you are biologically wired to love your own people. Being a hyper-rationalistic Redditor is repressed, given we're naturally wired to use magical and religious thinking. I'm not saying these things are good or bad, but merely what our nature is. Our ruling class competes over how malleable and compliant they are. They compete over how much
Like there are some people that are like ultra rationals. They're like the rational male or whatever the fuck. It's like they rationalize so much. It's like they rationalize their way into like negative outcomes. It's like they just like you can rationalize your way out of God, but the thing is, God is just a positive for your life and you as a person. The thing is, God can give you strength. Um, and it's like just believing in God gives you strength, right? So why not just accept that strength? Because if you go against somebody who, if you don't believe in God, but you again go against somebody who believes in God, the person who believes in God is gonna uh, not break, but you will break because you have nothing that grounds you. Does that make sense? It's like you abandoned something somebody else didn't. It's like they have more than you, if that makes sense. Ah, fuck. I'm horrendous at explaining that, but maybe somebody got it. It's like you're going against somebody who has more. Uh, so don't rationalize your way. Don't rationalize your way into having less, I should say.
much they can submit to authority. This is how malleable and compliant they are. They compete over how much they can submit to authority. This is since in the bureaucratic industrial system, your ability to submit to the machine determines your social value. This is why we're such a feminine society, in which telling people no is taboo, in which we accept absurd.
You should have the power to say no, but people get like extremely angry. So you have to be physically capable as a man to say no. So that means you have to be able to physically protect yourself. Because if you say no to some people, they get straight up violent. So for me, I had like a thing when I was a little bit younger, maybe like 2 years, 1 year ago. I thought like, okay, maybe I can be like, I mean, I knew I could never be like a real philosopher, but I was just thinking like, yeah, I could do something similar. But the thing is, I quickly realized that if I was gonna give my opinions truthfully on reality for what it truly is, like a realist kind of way, like there's always like that chance of physicality, right? So I took priority and kind of stepped back and focused more on action and physical. So if I learn how to fight, I can say what I want, right? Essentially, because a lot of people are cowards. Really, they don't speak their mind truly because there is that risk of being physically hurt and stuff. Because we are animals, human. It is always there, you know.
absurdities like that men are women, that the nation shouldn't exist, or that we should print infinite money. The ruling class are in a competitive virtue signaling contest to demonstrate how servile to the machine they are. Kaczynski wrote one of the best criticisms of the left that I have ever read. His criticism of leftism is so brilliant that it's easily become one of the top 10 most paradigm-building things I've ever seen. He said that the left is a resentful reaction to the over-socialization of modernity, that the left is a power fantasy of having total power over absolutely everything in society, that the reason they don't have a plan for what the dictatorship of the proletariat would look like is that the end point is to get a dictatorship itself. I'm going to talk about this more in the video on the anthropology of the left, which I will write very soon. However, Kaczynski repeatedly keeps on crapping on the left in the most insightful ways I have ever seen. The great irony for the left is that they simultaneously push for contradictory psychological drives. Firstly, they seek to push over-socialization even further, in that they—
Yeah, it's like they don't even see it, but it's like what they're pushing is actually the thing that makes it worse for themselves, which is crazy. It's like they push for the system that fucks them over.
They want to break human nature. The left wants to remove all animal aspects of humanity, whether sexual or family bonds, ethnicity, religion, martial values, honor, freedom, and the like, to be sublimated into the state. I have frequently said in previous videos that a society in collapse will push its worst trait even further, while at the same time the left pushes for total liberation from any standards or responsibility. They also simultaneously want total power with no responsibility, which in itself is an oxymoron. They also push for the collapse of modern civilization and industrialization. At the same time, they want a fully automated space communist civilization. The problem is that nothing the left says makes sense as a coherent strategy, and it never has. It's a psychologically unhealthy person rebelling against conditions which they didn't evolve for. What I think happened is that through studies in ancient wisdom, women are more dependent upon community and religion than men are. Thus, women, with the removal of those pre-industrial stabilizers, rebelled against the society through leftism without actually understanding the actual psychological drivers of what was happening. They could sense the cold—
I hear him completely.
Understanding the actual psychological drivers of what was happening. They could sense the cold impersonality, nihilism, soullessness, and loneliness of modernity, and tried to solve it in the female way of, we should just love each other and take care of everyone. When that didn't work, they begged to have the system burned down due to racism or climate change or whatever. Part 3. Yes, and. Okay, we've gotten this far. I think a lot of people, including myself, could find themselves agreeing with Kaczynski up to this point. I think his explanations for the flaws of industrial civilization are brilliant and original. I frankly find few other authors who have covered this in any kind of way, although it's clear that the Unabomber was drawing influence from Jacques Ellul and Lewis Mumford. However, the thing that I myself, and I would say most sane people, object to is what Kaczynski recommended after, and in fact, what he actually did. He says towards the end of his manifesto, which is pretty short and it's free online, so I'd recommend you folks read it after, is that industrial civilization will go in two separate directions on its current trajectory. He said that the 21st century would be the decision point for this, and that choices would be made which would change said trajectory in that time frame. The first would be that the psychological pressures of modernity would be great enough that it would collapse naturally. He said this would be promulgated by mental health issues, collapsing birth rates, rising crime, collapsing standards of conduct, and that sort of thing. You could very easily see wokeness or the collapsing birth rates as a form of this. A collective social just giving up. A sense that there's not really a point anymore. As longtime viewers of the channel would know, I agree with him. I have made so many previous videos talking about the global crisis that the planet will face in the 21st century. You can call it so many things, between the population crash, the psychological Black Death, Mouse utopia, the secular cycle, the crisis of the 21st century, the end of the Pax Americana. All of these add up to the realization that there is an attempt to put into words what is really an enormous historic crisis, which must occur like an avalanche that's about to crash upon us, in which we will only understand after it's happened. However, the Unabomber's second scenario, the one which terrified both himself and I, is also on the table. With genetic engineering, AI, and other technologies that we are gradually changing human nature in order to deal with the compliance required by the industrial system, we effectively turn into soulless hive creatures like ants or termites. Keep in mind, we already use genetic engineering on animals, so the technology's already been used for decades. This is a lot like the terrifying scenario Yuval Noah Harari lays out in Homo Deus. Something Kaczynski brings up is that this might not even be accomplished by a cruel top-down authoritarian government, which people would expect. Instead, let's say with a humane social democracy that starts using genetic engineering to help people with physical illness. Then they start using it to remove mental illnesses like depression, but the problem with that is that by doing this, you're removing the free thinkers, or the people with independent spirits, or who are sick in a system which is designed to naturally make people sick. The sensitive are those who are hurt the most by modernity. After a couple generations, what would be left of the human character? You would, after a small amount of time, hit either Brave New World or 1984. We're already seeing some of the foreshadowing for this. An example in Canada being the assisted suicide. Even for mental health issues, it wouldn't take much for them to say political opposition are naturally mentally ill, much like what occurred in the Soviet Union, and say that they need to be put down for their own good. Alternately, with the World Economic Forum, they talk about degrowth, and Yuval Noah Harari called half of the population useless eaters. What these types of people publicly aim for is using automation and genetic engineering to crush dissent. I mean, construct a utopia. I'm literally going to say this is all stuff that they're publicly saying that they're doing now. I really want to stress this. The thing that makes humanity beautiful is our individuality. It's our inner soul, our ability to sense the world and feel pain. When you remove that, we've lost the game of human history. Say goodbye to literally everything you care about.
They literally just want to kill the human soul. It's like insane. Yeah.
Equivalent to Mordor winning in Lord of the Rings. The world these kinds of people would make would turn humans into cogs or machines, not even animals. The human spirit buckles under tyranny, which is why evil must lose inevitably. With all this being said, what happens when you change the human character so it no longer buckles like that? It's in no way a coincidence that all the great artistic pieces of the industrial world, whether Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, Fight Club, American Beauty, Princess Mononoke, The Matrix, and so many more, are the fight against a giant depersonalizing force so that the human soul can survive. I hope you folks can understand why I don't think the Unabomber was crazy. The calculation he's making from his perspective is completely rational. I frankly would have done something similar if I was him, but different in one important way. I would have known in normal circumstances no one would read this. One of the great points Kaczynski makes is that even though we have a legal freedom of press with the big news stations that control everything, and so the reality is that there is mass control over information dissemination in a way that didn't exist 200 years ago. To be fair, one of the biggest things this channel does is trawl for obscure but brilliant 20th century authors that were completely forgotten by history. If he wasn't a terrorist, I would probably have never heard of Kaczynski's work, even though my job is looking for forgotten smart authors, since he wasn't operating in my chosen field of history or anthropology. If I were Kaczynski, I would try to do something crazy to get people's attention. I would probably start making hyper-controversial statements, maybe throw a huge raffle. With all that being said, I'm not sure any of that would actually work. Where I, and I think most other people, differ from him is in his acts of terrorism. At the end of his manifesto, he says that we should forcibly try to destroy the manufacturing ability of industrial civilization, literally fomenting hatred of technology itself and attacking those who work in the field. The thing, though, is that this is a terrible strategy. If he asked me, I would tell him that would only result in invalidating his cause and turning the entire ideals of the organization into a social taboo. It would work if the general public disliked technology more, but the reality is that the average person loves the conveniences of modern technology and never wants to part with them. I think Kaczynski was in a tremendous amount of pain psychologically and needed an easy or quick solution. He was feeling powerless and so tried to do the most direct route. I also get the sense he was a man who reached a point where he didn't really care much whether he lived or died. I don't approve of his terrorist activities, but I will point out that he won. He's gotten to the point where his ideas are very widely circulated. Hell, we're currently talking about them on this channel, and most of you know who he is. If the struggle of the 21st century is as close as he believed it would be, he might actually have indirectly changed the tide of the conflict. I don't think Kaczynski, if he saw the results of what his actions would be, would have been disappointed with the result. It's comparable to how I've said before that Al-Qaeda won 9/11. There's a book called The Grace of Kings, which is one of my favorite fiction books ever, about a fantasy version of Chinese history. The title of the book relates to a faction betraying a treaty with another faction in order to unify the country. The meaning of the Grace of Kings is that in the grand scheme of things, the character did the right thing by breaking the treaty, which then allowed the unification of the continent. When all's said and done, are the 3 lives Kaczynski killed worth changing history for? Only time will tell, but this line of thinking eventually ends up with Hitler and Stalin when pushed to its natural conclusion. In these sorts of things, I can see why traditional world religions tell people to stop worrying and to trust God instead. In that, right when Kaczynski committed these crimes, a new technological discovery came out which completely changed the calculus on this entire issue. This is one of the best and worst parts of modernity, in that changes occur so rapidly that you have no idea what the world will look like even 30 years from now. That discovery, one which radically pushed disunity, was the internet. No one really thinks through the geopolitical ramifications of the internet. However, it's going to become an absolute game changer. When the Unabomber was writing, the world was at peak pro-centralization. Due to the technology's sheer scale was very efficient. The internet flips the entire calculus in that rather than a single company making products, it's cheaper to get it off Etsy, or rather than working with a traditional taxi company, you use Uber instead. Rather than outsourcing to a university, you're learning through YouTube. The internet has potential, if used correctly, to turn everything the Unabomber said on its head. The internet could allow the ruralization of society, the breakdown of top-down government authoritarianism, organic social operation and self-employment. The rise in the gig economy, as well as digital replacements for legacy institutions, is literally just proving all of this. The internet also has the potential to go into other directions in which the government can use it to monitor the entire population for their whole lives. I'm going to do something I normally don't and shill crypto. If we don't want the internet to devolve into authoritarianism, we have to develop an encrypted, secretive, private, blockchain-based internet which doesn't allow data oppression. And the next generation, we need to have an active decision to keep the internet and our societies, by extension, free. Biology does a lot of this stuff around this topic and has built a movement around making sure hierarchical authorities can't use the internet to control people. If you're interested, check it out. We also need to make an active decision that we want to be the sort of society which values the human soul, that we respect and love our own humanity even with its flaws, that we aren't willing to trade our souls for money which will realistically accumulate to the elites. You know, this stuff used to depress me. I went through a few-year period of legitimate grieving, of realizing I didn't live in the Simpsons or John Hughes America I thought I would. The thing is that politics at this level affects everything in your life, whether work, romantic options, religion, political, or social views. Then I realized I prefer this since it allows me to go hard and do cool stuff. What's the point of living if you're not going hard?
Nice. Anyway, boys, what do you guys think? I thought it was interesting. Yeah. Oh, I get what he's trying to say. Anyway, boys, I hope you guys enjoyed this one. I catch you boys on the next one. Take care of yourself.